You've been following along with us. We did the offensive players. Now we're on to IDP. We're going to be doing both Joe and my rankings. So, Joe, why don't you start off? Who do you have in tier number 1?
All right. Tier number 1 at number 1, I've got Abdul Carter. At number 2, Micah Parsons. 3, Will Anderson. And 4, Aiden Hutchinson.
All right. At number 1, I've got Micah Parsons. 2, Max Crosby. 3, Nick Bosa. 4, Aiden Hutchinson. 5, TJ Watt. And 6, Myles Garrett. Joe comes out of the gate swinging with Abdul Carter getting the number 1 spot. We haven't even seen him have one snap on the field. You must be a big believer in this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, clearing away, he was the best defensive end, in this class. He was one of the, true blue chip players in this draft. And I just think, he just turned 21 in January as well. So he's a youthful guy. That's, his youth and age has a lot to do with me putting him at number 1. And I think he definitely has like the skill set to, be a dominant player. And I know, a lot of people like to compare him to like a Micah Parsons type, played, inside linebacker, edge, also happened to play at Penn State. They have, speed player as well. He's got the tools and intangibles to really turn into a dominant edge player.
I mean, I'll be talking about him later. I definitely think he has the ability to be a dominant edge player. He's got that raw bend that, when you've got that bend like Von Miller, right, Joe? I mean, if they're able to do that, that's a really good sign. So why don't I ask you this? So in an IDP combined league with offense, in our league, we obviously view IDP and offense on the same scale. Is he, like, in your opinion, the number 1 guy? As far as best player available, if you look at best player available, pound per pound, who you think would be, the best blue chip, is that him?
I think it's got to be Travis Hunter.
Okay.
And that's because, especially in our league, I mean, you're going to get points from him at corner potentially and wide receiver. So just because of that, I think he's an absolute unicorn. But that's where I think, Travis Hunter would probably still have to be that guy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he's in the conversation, though. I mean, he's an elite prospect for the edge. And honestly, going to a decent situation in New York. Now, I'm a little surprised because you're focusing on edge. Max Crosby, nowhere to be found. But he's not that old either, Joe. He's 27 years old, and so is Nick Bosa. He's 27 years old, and yet no inclusion of them. But Micah Parsons is 26, but you've got Micah Parsons in here. So I'm kind of curious as to your thought process there.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the stats, I mean, Parsons has been ultra consistent. Not to say that like those guys haven't, but just what Parsons able to do. It seems like I think of back-to-back seasons with 13 plus sacks as well. He's been a durable guy too, not missing time. Where some of the downfall with Max Crosby and Nick Bosa tend to kind of get dinged up a little bit.
Well, especially with Max Crosby, he plays so much of the time. I mean, what was it? One year he played like, what was it, 100% of snaps or something like that? I mean, he doesn't really rotate. I actually think he could be. I mean, he was already really good, so how much better can he be? But I think him with Pete Carroll will be a really interesting combination. I think he's going to let him just unleash.
Yeah, he definitely could. I just, part of me just wonders, like, have we just seen the best out of Max Crosby? Not that he's been bad, but like, is he ever going to reach that one season that he did in fact have, and it was a really nice season? Is he ever going to be able to reach that ceiling that he had?
So I'll talk about TJ Watt and Myles Garrett here. TJ Watt, 30 years old, Myles Garrett, 29. I've been consistent on this. I think even though they're older, which again, interesting because you've mentioned in previous episodes how you got to have a blend. But Nick Bosa. TJ Watt is the ultimate cheat code. I mean, what this guy has been able to do, since he's been in the league, honestly, is absolutely remarkable. I mean, the guy just puts unbelievable numbers. Garrett also has good numbers, not as eye-popping as Watt. I feel like Watt, time and time again, he shows up. But both of these guys are just elite. And we know edge players can play later in their career, 32, 33, 34. So it's not like these guys are going to be hitting a cliff here. I think they still got a few more years left to go. So to me, I'd still be happy about them. I think they should be involved in tier one here.
Yeah, I mean, that is fair. I do agree that, those guys, even though they are older, they still got a few years left. I mean, I don't have them ranked as far off as you do.
That's
From
how
you,
it happens. That's
it
how it
just
happens.
happens that I just don't have them in tier number one like you. That's all. I mean, and that's
Yeah,
usually how it goes with us.
right. Now, one guy I am a little nervous about, and you kind of have him a little bit lower than you normally do, with Aiden Hutchinson. It seems like is he the same? Will he be the same guy? He's rehabilitating from that injury. And even some of the, I guess, what do you want to call it? Workout videos that have been posted online. You have these different, Twitter doctors coming out being like, well, it doesn't look good. This doesn't look good. There seems to be a little bit of a concern about Hutchinson. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, there does seem to be a little concern, and I guess anytime a guy has an injury like that, there has got to be some concern. Is will he still have being able to have that same explosiveness that he had, or his technique and his play? But being that like he wasn't a guy that relied on a ton of speed or just a pure speed rusher, I'm not as nervous about it. But it's just more so like looking at it where a lot of these other guys have really good like opposite guys that play opposite of them. And Hutchinson, the Lions really haven't given him much help in terms of that. So he kind of relies on himself to produce all the pass rush there.
So let's head over to tier number 2.
All right, in tier 2 here at number 5, I've got Max Crosby, 6 TJ Watt, 7 Myles Garrett, 8 Nick Bosa, 9 Jared Verse, and 10 Trey Hendrickson.
All right, at number 7, I've got Will Anderson, 8 Abdul Carter, 9 Jared Verse, 10 Brian Burns, and 11 Josh Hines Allen. So not too different between you and I, Joe. And you, like you said, wasn't only a matter of time until you started saying the same guys I did. One guy I think is kind of interesting here is Trey Hendrickson. Obviously, we've heard a lot in the news about him. There's a lot of scuttlebutt between him and the Bengals of whether or not he can get a contract extension. Recently, he felt offended based on what was happening. I'm a little nervous about that situation. Obviously, he had an incredible year last year, led the league in sacks for edge rushers and honestly for the entire league. So that's my major concern with him. And you obviously don't see that as a concern.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I think he's got every right to feel disrespected. The Bengals told him that he was going to get a contract, and then he absolutely balls out, leads league in sacks, and then here it is time to get paid, and they're haven't paid him up to yet. But I do think they'll get something done. I feel differently if Trey Hendrickson at the end of the day didn't want to be like a Cincinnati Bengal, but he's mentioned him and his family really enjoy their Cincinnati, and he wants to stay a Bengal. So I think when push comes to shove, the Bengals get something done here.
I think if anything, maybe it's one of those things that we've been seeing where he has like a 1-year deal. Because I think he has a 1-year deal left of the team, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe I'm wrong about that. But maybe they'll add incentives to it. We've seen some of that at times where they'll add more incentives on. If they do really well, then he gets paid more. But I don't know. If it becomes a Hassan Reddick situation where he holds out, that's the nightmare.
Yeah, if he, you're right. If it gets to that point, I would feel differently because typically, kind of like Hassan Reddick, when these guys hold out, typically it doesn't go well.
No.
They're more prone to soft tissue injuries too if they're not in full training camp and everything, and really ramping up before the season. So you're not wrong. Like if he holds out, that will be an absolute nightmare.
One guy here that you and I are a little bit different on here is Will Anderson, who surprisingly that you're higher than I am because I'm a huge fan of his. Obviously, not that many people would know this, but in our league, I traded up to go get this guy in our IDP Dynasty salary cap league. I just think he hasn't reached that elite level yet. He's obviously done really well. His rookie year, he was solid. Second year, he built on that. I'm just expecting more from him with him and Danielle Hunter. So I'm hoping he kind of takes that next jump in year 3.
Yeah, that's right. I think he will take a jump in year 3 here, and he's still think he's 23 years old still as well. So still a young player. And I think, we've seen edge rushers before, kind of build off of, each year they continue to kind of build up and ramp up to a year 3, breakout. And I think Will Anderson could be in that boat here.
Now, based on what we've been talking about here, it seems like you're usually right after me. So I'm expecting you to be talking about Josh Hines-Allen here as well.
Yeah, I know. You're going to be disappointed where I end up having Josh Hines-Allen here.
Really?
Yeah,
All
we're
right. Well,
definitely different on him.
so are we better off to talk about it now, or should we leave the folks at home with a cliffhanger to see how you're going to drop the hammer against them?
Yeah, we can keep him waiting.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, why don't we head over to tier number 3? Who do you got there?
All right, so my tier number 3 at number 11, I've got Brian Burns, 12, Gregory Rousseau, 13, Danielle Hunter, 14, Harold Landry, 15, Andrew Van Ginkel, and 16, Trayvon Walker.
All right, at number 12, I've got Danielle Hunter, 13, Trey Hendrickson, 14, Harold Landry, and 15, Jonathan Grenard. I got to tell you, I thought I was going to be really bold with this pick of Harold Landry at 14 because I think he's extremely underrated. And look at that. You've got him at 14. We do not talk about this ahead of time. You and I do not know what each other are going to pick prior to the episode dropping. So I was a little surprised by that, pleasantly surprised. I don't know about you, Joe. I think he's extremely underrated.
Yeah, I do think he's underrated as well. And, I feel like he's kind of a bit of a forgotten guy, and I was just looking at his production, and I think, ultimately, when I originally made my list, I was thinking about not having him on there, but then re-looked at things, and then I was like, no, I got to have this guy, and really intrigued by this landing spot with the New England Patriots as well. They've really bolstered up that D line, and really like his situation that he's going from Tennessee to New England, and I think continues to produce have a productive season with double-digit sacks here in New England.
It's a dream landing spot for Harold Landry. He reunites with Mike Vrabel as his defensive coordinator, who drafted him originally back to when he entered into the league. He goes back to his stomping grounds. He was a Boston College player. And not to mention, like you said, that defense is a heck of a lot better. I think he's in for a really good season. I wouldn't even be surprised if he has a career year. I think he could do really, really well. I mean, he, like you say, he's been a model of consistency. Other than that injury that he had, I think it was an Achilles, or ACL, I can't remember, but he was out for the year. I think it was ACL, maybe. He was out for the year. It was at ground training, a little before training camp, where all of a sudden he was out. But other than that, he's been solid.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem. I think that's him missing that season. I think, has hurt him in terms of his value, and I think that's kind of why he's been the forgotten guy. But like you said, he's just been the model of consistency, and with a way better situation, I do think he's definitely got a chance for this to be his best year, like you said.
Now, I'm a little surprised that you had Van Ginkel ahead of Grenard, both the Minnesota Viking edge rushers. Any reason in particular why that is?
Well, I mean, looking back to our league here, Van Ginkel was the defensive end 3 in our league,
Yeah.
and had a really good season. I know it was his first year in Minnesota, and Grenard's has a bit more of a track record with him. But what Van Ginkel was just able to do, and I think, part of it too was he had a couple of pick sixes in there. Not sure he's gonna, can guarantee to have those mixed into this next year. But I like his upside, and it was his first full time having full time playing time. But I've always liked the way Van Ginkel plays.
Yeah, well, he plays with his hair on fire, and that's what you love.
Yeah, I can't deny that.
No, here's the thing. Grenard's got back-to-back 12 sack seasons. We wondered what was going to happen with that Minnesota defense with Danielle Hunter left and went to Houston. I thought they were going to be in some trouble, but boy, was I wrong. I just think Brian Flores knows how to coach up this defense in general, but knows how to work these edge rushers. Seems like it doesn't matter who he plugs in there. They end up doing really well. I mean, even Van Ginkel was a leftover from Miami when he was in Miami. So, and he didn't even perform to the level that he did with Minnesota. I mean, he had a career year. So anybody, it seems like in that system, does really, really well. I hear what you're saying about Van Ginkel. He obviously had the better year, but I think over the past 2 years, Grenard has a better track record. I didn't put Van Ginkel in my top 24. Not a guy that I would consider. I mean, he is a little bit on the older side as well at 29 years old, where Grenard's a year younger at 28. So, but at the end of the day, for edge rushers, that's minuscule.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, we've got plenty of other guys that are, 28, 29 years old as well. But yeah, the different things that in Van Ginkel's ability to, get the interceptions and stuff, I think that gives him, little bit of
I
an
think it's
edge
a little
there.
fluky, though.
It is, but if you watch though, like he almost had another pick six and he dropped it. Like his ability to like read
He's very
screens and follow
anticipatory.
off,
Yeah.
like he really does. He reads the plays. So like I said, the fact that he had 2 picks and they both went for 6 is, not going to happen again. But he does get his hands on the ball at least.
I was a little surprised you've got Brian Burns here in tier 3 and not tier 2. Do you just expect that Abdul Carter is going to take over for that team? Because Burns has been the model of consistency. I recognize he only had one season over 10 sacks. He had 12 and a half sacks, but he usually has a decent tackle floor, and he's good for around 8 or 9 sacks each year.
Yeah, no, I mean, he definitely could have been in tier 2. They definitely could make an argument for it. It just was. I like the guys that I put in tier 2 a little bit better than him, but it's not a matter of like his like lack of upside or talent or me worrying about Abdul Carter being there.
All right, why don't we head over to tier number 4? Who do you got?
All right, in tier 4, 17, I got Jonathan Grenard, 18, Nick Benito, 19, Josh Hines Allen, and at 20, Yaya Diaby.
All right, at 16, I've got James Pierce Jr., 17, Trevon Walker, 18, Greg Rousseau, and 19, Kayvon Thibodeau. All right, Joe, the hammer is finally dropped. 19 is where Hines Allen takes the tumble. I have him at 10, you have him at 19. Why the sudden drop, Joe?
I just with Josh Hines Allen, he's had 2 years with double digit sacks, and every other year has just kind of been 7 or 8 sacks. So I'm concerned, if 7 or 8 sacks is just kind of where he's at, and to me, with that, if he can't get the double digit sacks on a more consistent basis, then he's not deserving to really be in the top 12 there.
Interesting. I mean, 7, 8 sacks is pretty good, Joe.
It is, but like the elite guys can get double digit sacks and be consistent. I mean, heck, even his counterpart in Trayvon Walker's got back to back 10 sacks seasons. So.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, he's not a high tackle getter. You really got to rely on the sacks for him to have the value. I think, I don't mind that he gets 7 or 8 sacks. I don't, and he's young still. I think the Jaguars were sort of a mess last year, so I'm not as concerned about that. I think you got him a little low, but I know you probably don't even have Kayvon Thibodeau in your top 24 if I had to guess. No, I knew that.
Absolutely not. I mean,
Yeah,
that guy's history with Abdul Carter now.
But what did you make of them accepting the 5th-year option, though? That's kind of odd.
It is. I don't know, but heck, it's the Giants, man. A lot of the stuff that they do don't make any sense.
That doesn't make sense to me. I would have traded. I mean, Burns isn't going anywhere. Abdul Carter's there. I mean, they could do a NASCAR package.
I mean,
but
you got to have depth, and he's a good depth and rotational guy. But with that crowded room now, I mean, not only have I just been down on Kayvon Thibodeau, but with Abdul Carter there, I think really that limits his opportunities.
I would have liked it better had they not accepted the 5th-year option and he would have been a free agent next year, or had he been traded. But maybe they will. I mean, it's possible. It's not, at the deadline, I could see him still getting traded.
Yeah, and sometimes having that 5th-year option, we mentioned it before, or maybe makes it a little bit easier to trade him to, just a little bit more stability for the team that's acquiring him.
I'm a little surprised that you had Greg Rousseau as high as you did. Look, I'm a Bills fan. I like Rousseau. But the thing is McDermott, he's a big believer in the rotation. So, he's got to do a lot with a little as far as snaps go. And he's never had over 10 sacks. He had 8 sacks this past year. So he definitely had a really good year. He's obviously a better, he does well in the tackle department. I found that one interesting.
Yeah, well, I had him pretty high the last time too, and you questioned me on it.
I did. I
So
did.
I mean, it was just I just didn't couldn't feel like I wanted to move him. Coming off a good year, Von Miller's no longer there. Heck, Joey Bosa's already injured heading into camp already. So maybe that equals more opportunities for Russo. I do get that they do the rotation, but also I don't necessarily like. It's not necessarily a disadvantage in the fact that it keeps him fresh, but yet it is because, like you said, when he's out there, he's got to capitalize on those opportunities.
Yeah. One other guy here, James Pierce Jr. He was a guy that you and I talked about as when we did our IDP rankings. He was right up there. I think he has as far as and I don't know him personally, right? But they say the character, right? That was a big concern with him. If Raheem Morris could get the most out of this guy, I think their pass rush problems could be solved. I mean, they haven't had a dominant edge rusher probably since John Abraham, and that's a long time ago. I'm trying to think if there's any other one that
That
comes
is a
off the
long
top of
time
my
ago.
head. I think that might be the last one that I could think of that would put fear on the other side of the ball that you got that guy on the opposite side. So I'd prefer him over Jalen Walker. I'm concerned. I think he's a tweener. I think he could be used. I think he may even shift into inside as an inside off the ball linebacker. To be honest with you, maybe he stays edge rusher. It's possible. I mean, there have been undersized players who can do it, and maybe he is. But ultimately, I really like Pierce. You got to think the Falcons traded a future first to get this guy.
Pierce is a guy that I think we both liked a lot. Just his intangibles and the speed, you just can't teach it. And he is my second ranked defensive end in terms of rookies, just after Abdul Carter.
So I'll probably hear his name here shortly.
No,
Really, you didn't feel like he deserved a top 24? I'm surprised.
he was one of the guys that I just felt like I don't know. I just felt like I couldn't make room for him. There was some interesting
Wow.
guys um that I liked, ahead of him. But he's definitely a guy I considered and probably would have liked to have him in there. Just I couldn't really find a good spot for him.
Well, that shocks me. All right. Well, let's head over to our final tier, tier number 5, Joe. Who do you got there?
All right, and tier number 5 at number 21, we've got Tuli Tui Pelotu, 22 Nolan Smith, 23 Leatu Latu, and 24 Dallas Turner.
All right. So at number 20, I've got Nick Bonito, 21 Will McDonald, 22 Chop Robinson, 23 Nolan Smith, and 24 Shamar Stewart. This is where I felt like the tier really, there was a noticeable difference here, jumping from the 4th tier to the 5th tier. Sometimes there isn't as much of a difference. You and I will have guys that just kind of, intersect between those two. Now, you'll disagree with me on Nick Bonito, I'm sure. I mean, you have him a lot higher. Well, I mean, I guess you have him at
I
18.
only
You're
got
not
two
that much
spots higher.
higher.
Yeah.
I just think he had a dominant year last year. I just wonder if it was a flash in the pan. That's my biggest concern with the guy.
Yeah, and it definitely could be. I mean, that's why I ultimately didn't rank them higher as well. It could be, and then the Broncos just have another team. Just they've got so many players at the edge rusher position. Feel like they're going to be using a rotation too. So how does Benito get impacted there? And he's not the best run defender,
No.
as he's not the biggest guy. So that also could impact his playing time too.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, honestly, you could make an argument, in my opinion, all the guys that you and I talked about here, someone could legitimately make an argument that they belong in tier 5. I mean, you got Tuli Tuipulotu, he could really take a next step. Joey Bosa's no longer there. They didn't really address the position. Honestly, that might be an oversight on my part. He's just not a flashy name, but he's a
No,
guy that, he means business, and probably a guy that in hindsight, I probably would consider bringing him in here. We both have Nolan Smith, which obviously I think he's the best pass rusher on the team. They just traded Bryce Huff, although he did nothing for them. But they don't really have anybody, honestly. So it's got to be him. I know you've been you and others really like Latu. He's got the skills and abilities. I'd be curious to see, how he fares here in his second year. I thought about Dallas Turner, but then for me on my side here, Will McDonald showed a lot of promise with the Jets. I think he could really do something. Chop Robinson as well. Did not expect him to have as much of an impact as he did. Primarily, he just had the chop move. That's why they call him Chop Robinson. and speed on the edge, but he was able to do a lot more than I anticipated. And Shamar Stewart, he's a guy that's just the potential is off the charts. The question is, can he put it all together? And with the Bengals, he's going to be given every opportunity possible, in my opinion, because they're going to need it. I mean, they swung to try to hit a home run because they know they're investing all of their capital in the offense. So they want game wreckers, and he is the definition of that. It's just a question is, can he finish?
Yeah, you're not wrong. He's got all the intangibles and things that you'd want, and obviously blew the combine out of the water. But you're concerned about Trey Hendrickson, but this guy also hasn't even signed his rookie contract.
No, he
to
hasn't,
get
but we're
out there,
talking about
so
4 years, though. I mean, it's not like they're
yeah,
not. I mean, like, are they going to just forego their first round pick? That would be
no,
crazy.
yeah, that would be crazy.
Of the guys I talked about, were any of them in consideration? My biggest consideration on your end was Dallas Turner, on the guys that you have in there that I don't have.
Yeah, for me it was Will McDonald, and he was the one guy that I was talking to you pre-show that you
Interesting.
would probably be disappointed that I didn't have. He was a guy I knew you would have.
Why did
He's
you say that? I mean, I was a big fan of him coming out of the draft.
you've brought him up time and time again, and like you said, you're a big fan of him. So I knew he would be in your top 24. Ultimately, like he was, I literally he was kind of the guy that I had to take off because I was adding in Harold Landry. So he was literally my 25th guy. So
Well, him getting 10.5 sacks, that's a big jump for him.